We are live on Facebook. Good evening, Sarah. Good evening, Graham.
Evening.
Hey, Jason. Hi, Graham. Excited to be here.
Hi,
Yes. So, Sarah, you are our incomparable host tonight.
Yes.
So we are in your very capable hands because I think as we talked about offline, I think if Graham and I ran this, we would probably be on here to what, 10, 11 p.m.?
Oh, tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So, Sarah, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. Well, welcome to our viewers tonight. This is the kind of first foray the three of us are joining in doing today's Facebook Live, and we're super excited about it. If you didn't see the note or any of our posts that we've made up until now, what we're talking about tonight is a really important topic for so many of us right now, which is about resilience. And so the plan is just to kind of go around the room and talk about our experiences with it, how we're, addressing the challenges that we're all, faced with COVID-19, Black Lives Matter. If you're in California right now, there are these terrible fires going on. And that doesn't even begin to capture any of the personal challenges that we might be up against. So I'm really excited to unpack this topic with Graham and Jason. And I think we should just start with some introductions. And Graham, I'm going to kick it over to you for an intro.
Hi, everyone. My name's Graham Dobbin. With a centre in New York. We're a training business, so we work with the people side of business. Tends to be around about leadership, sales, presentation skills, and also about networking. So one of the big things that we're really passionate about how to build great relationships with especially our professional colleagues and how to get depth into those relationships. And I'm sure we're probably going to use some of that this evening.
That's awesome. Definitely. And Jason.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Frazell, and I'm a success and leadership coach. I work for myself, which I know we're going to get into tonight. And I work with high achievers who work mostly at tech startups. And I also work with a lot of entrepreneurs on all sorts of topics, resilience being one of those. Previous to this, I spent almost 20 years in sales. So we're going to talk about sales tonight as well, because we'll have some people tuning in that are interested in that. And I also have a podcast. So what's really cool about this live tonight is I'm recording it and I'm going to release it as a bonus podcast episode as well, minus the videos. So we don't need to look pretty for the podcast, but you'll be hearing our beautiful faces on the airwaves on Thursday morning.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. And my name is Sarah Helstrom. I have a similar path to Jason in that for the last 15 years of my career, I was in the tech world working for a variety of software firms between San Francisco and New York. I've been a very happy resident of New York City for the last 4 years. Recently moved to Long Island City. And I am an entrepreneur. I launched a sales and marketing consultancy towards the end of last year, which turns out to be not that bad of a time to launch a business, despite COVID. And I have secured some wins, so we can definitely, talk about that. But at the core of what I do is I help companies figure out how to capture their customers, mostly using digital channels, and data's at the helm of how we make decisions on what's going to work best for my customers. So that's me, and my firm is called The Modern Fig. And so, let's just kind of jump into, this topic of resilience for our group. My first question for Jason and Graham is, how do you define resilience and what role has it played in your life?
I just want to pause you for 1 minute, Sarah. Just to be clear, you're answering these questions as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I'll pause you as well, just so Jason's going first with this one. Just
perfect. I'm going to need you to repeat the question. Graham has totally thrown me off my game. Could you repeat the question, Sarah? I'm not very resilient when it comes to that, to being ready to answer the question after Graham and Sarah throw me off.
Oh my gosh, yes. The question is, how do you define resilience and what role has it played in your life?
So I just find resilience as the ability to quote, just hit me. Quote the 90s song, I get knocked down, but I get up again. I think it's called Tub Thumping by Badawamba, I believe it's called. But it's like the ability to be resilient in the face of things that either sometimes it's just your feelings about things and being resilient in the face of your feelings. Sometimes it's resilience in the face of things that happen to you in the world or things that happen to other people that you know that happen to you. Like, for example, like getting laid off from a job, or for those of us who've done sales, which all three of us here had a lot of experience in sales, you have that big deal that you commit to your manager. And then at the end of the month, oops, I think we've probably all been there. And being able to like, yeah, never. You've closed every deal you've ever worked on. Yes, of course.
100% close rate right here.
100% close rate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just like the ability to get back up and brush yourself off and keep going after what you really care about. And for me, I think like, again, like coming from the sales world previously, the resilience is all around that. You're going to get more no's than yes, no matter what you sell. Right. Even if you sell the most popular product in the world, you're still going to get a lot of no's. Right. And I think now, being a couple of years into my business, just being resilient about starting a business, it's, say it's not for the faint of heart. It's not, because it doesn't matter how good your skill is or what you do for people. It's just the fact that you're out here either by yourself with a small team of people in the middle of a very crowded marketplace. So just being resilient when you hear the no's there, you just continue to go on. So that's in a nutshell what I think of resilience, or how I view it.
Yeah, that's an awesome definition, Jason. And I love
something.
Oh yeah, Chumbawamba.
Chumbawamba or something like that. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I love that song. I especially really love the part about, feelings and the aspect of resiliency around your emotions, because sometimes, depending on the circumstances, that might be, the real effort to really, move through. So those are great observations, Jason. Graham, what about you?
Resilience is really it's a state of mind. It's where we prepare ourselves. A lot of it's just to do with how do we deal with uncertainty. We've had a lot of uncertainty recently, and it's how do we almost compartmentalize that? How do we turn around and say, well, how can I deal with this, and almost block everything else out? So it's about, very much, to me, resilience is very much on dealing with the active now. There's a phrase in the UK, bounce back ability. I don't know, I think it was a soccer manager or something that brought that word in. But it's about look, things are not always going to work. They're going to fail.
Right.
How do we deal with that point and be prepared for it? Because so much in life is unpredictable. And don't even talk about now. When we think about personally and in business, things are changing constantly. One of the things I'm getting heavily involved with is working with leadership teams on how they can deal with change. And one of the things I was doing some studying just a few weeks ago on the effects of it in business, and it's something like the Fortune 100 companies, just in the top 20, something like half of those companies didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that means there were companies there that things have changed just organically, and they change in stages. And resilience is all about understanding we've probably got a lot more about us than we necessarily believe at a certain point. It's getting rid of the overwhelm, not allowing that to happen, and having some kind of space to think clearly and logically about whatever's there. So I think it's a lot about uncertainty.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that tremendously. And I love that phrase, bounce back ability. That's totally gets to the heart of the matter. And I kind of want to formalize that and use it in my own.
I've trademarked it. I've actually just trademarked it.
So now I owe you a royalty right now.
Just for even saying it, yes.
Perfect. His attorney has the letter already drafted. Yes.
Add it to my tab. Yeah, well, I would say I really agree with both of your, definitions. For me, I think resiliency, and I was thinking about this, it's actually not a point in time that you decide to be resilient or not. For me, it's actually ingrained in how I live every day. And it really speaks to your observations, Graham, around uncertainty, because every day we wake up in the morning and we don't know what's going to happen. Morning commutes can require tremendous resiliency just to get to the place that we want to get to, let alone the adversity that I mentioned earlier that so many people are really trying to work through right now. So for me, resiliency has played a tremendous, role in my life, and it's something that's ingrained with every breath that I take, because we just don't know what's around the next corner. I would also say that, we all, I don't mean to get spiritual or anything, but like, I believe in karma. And I believe that, some people's karma is heavier than other people's karma. And I would say that when I was in my teens and my 20s, my karma was really heavy. So I experienced a lot of loss, a lot of personal loss. I lost my grandfather when I was 16, my mother when I was 19, and then my grandmother when I was 24. And these personal challenges, at that age, they present such an uphill climb. And at that moment, when I was in my, my early to mid 20s, nobody really taught me what grief was. Nobody taught me what loss was, or what the feelings or emotions were that come with, losing someone that's really close to you. And so, my response at the time was, I don't know what's going on, but there's this really heavy, scary emotion that I feel, and it's this huge beach ball. So all I'm going to do is push this way down, because if it comes to the surface, something terrible is going to happen. I don't know what it is. I might die. At least that's what I felt like in the moment. But it wasn't until my late 20s when I had a relationship end. And then I also was changing jobs at the time, where this beach ball of grief that I had pushed so far down all of a sudden came to the surface because of these certain topical events that had happened. And so, resiliency, it's not something that can take place over the course of a few minutes or a few hours or even a few days, depending on the circumstances. Resiliency can occur over years of time. And so, I wanted to offer that because I feel that, these kinds of situations are very real to so many of us right now. And I didn't want to, miss this opportunity to connect with the people that are listening right here and right now, that, those that have lost, family members from COVID-19, again, these fires, Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's just so much happening. And so, that's just a little bit about my experience with resiliency, and that, it can really take place over a long time.
Yeah. Sarah, just wanted to mention something that you said about I like the beach ball analogy, and the idea that if you hold it down, like, you can't actually hold it down for that long. And instead of allowing it to be on the surface and exploring it and being with it, it pops, and it doesn't explode, but it actually pops up in the air, which you could look at as I like that analogy. I've heard that before. I don't know if it was like a coaching thing or a therapeutic thing, but that's a really good analogy. So yeah. For the people watching or that will listen or watch this, think about, do you have any beach balls that you're holding down? Because it takes a lot of energy to hold it down too. A lot of energy.
Right. So do either of you have experiences of adversity in your life that you're willing to, open up and share a little bit about, and how you kind of tackled it?
I think my guess is that every single person has had, some personal adversity. I think how we tackle it, whether that be personal or in business, I think how we tackle it is by having selective deafness at times, because we can be overwhelmed by how we're supposed to feel, what we're supposed to think, what we're being told should be happening. Right. And whether that's in a personal, whether it's grief, whether it's where a business is struggling, whether it's when you've got, a lot of external factors. I was speaking to one of my colleagues today who's across in Santa Rosa. And, we had a really open conversation about the fires. And I said to him, I've heard of these the last 3 or 4 years. Is this normal? He went, no, it's the new normal. This is what happens. I said, so how are you dealing with it? He went, they're about 10, 15 miles away. We're keeping an eye on them. Now, exactly. So I'm watching your expressions and it's like, wow, that's close. But these guys are there going, okay, we know what we're dealing with. We're compartmentalizing it. And it's really easy to have that overwhelm that I mentioned earlier when we start to listen to the media. We start to listen to friends. We listen to where people not in our experience are saying to us, that must be scary. That must be this or that. it's up to us to decide how we actually deal with it, whatever it is. As far as resilient, I mean, yes, there's a whole lot of things. I remember one of the things I was speaking about quite recently was when I moved to New York, which was about 3 years ago now. So 3 years ago, right now, I'd given up all my contracts, sold my house, living week to week in an apartment, and didn't have a visa and didn't know if I was going to get one.
Oh, wow.
My wife had given up her job. So we were all in. And when people were saying, "Wow, I can't believe you did that," we did it in stages. We just, we kind of went through it. And I think if someone had said to me at the beginning, "This is the point you'll get to, and then we'll decide if you get a visa," I probably would have said, "No, that's too risky." We took one step at a time and just got to the stage, well, if that doesn't happen, we know we've got enough about us to do something else. What else will it be? And when I tell people that story, I can see the reactions. You gave everything up, and we were ready. And then we moved to New York without a single customer. Started up a brand new business in a new market. It didn't seem scary at the time. If someone said to me, if a client said to me, "I'm about to do that," "You're mad. What are you thinking?" But in the moment and just how we dealt with it, it all seemed logical at the time. And obviously, I'm delighted we've done it. I would never have met you guys.
You want to be here on Facebook Live on the end of August in 2020 without, yeah, it's awesome.
It's 2020?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Graham, I'm really glad you made that decision too. And I'm so can you talk a little bit more about like the uncertainty piece, because people have, really a variety of responses to uncertainty. So, what was your mindset at that time, and how did you, really move through it?
It's strange, and I'm always wary about talking about goals and everything, but understanding kind of what you wanted to get to was a driving factor. That's one of them. But I liken it to when people say to me, I could never set up my own company. I could never be self-employed. I said, well, why? So, well, I like the certainty of a paycheck. I learned a long time ago, there's no certainty to a paycheck. You're a certain, I would much rather take control of where I was going to pay my rent or my mortgage.
Sure.
And take the good and the bad with that, rather than rely on someone else's decisions. But that's just my mindset. But people almost get into a false sense of security on where checks have come from. And again, we're talking about businesses that have changed over the last few years. If you look at some of the examples that I've been using, Blockbuster, Kodak, BlackBerry, Nokia, you look at Yahoo before Google. Look at MySpace or Bebo before Facebook.
Right.
All these look massive companies with lots of safety within them. And the employees didn't have that then. At the end, it didn't actually mean a lot. So I think sometimes there's a point where we give ourselves some false sense of security on it, and we don't think about how resilient we really are. I have been laid off from jobs. I have lost jobs, all these kind of things, and it seems like the worst thing possible at the time. We come through it. We deal with it. And I personally, I work with Dale Carnegie, and there's one of his books. I call it the worry book. I shouldn't call it the worry book. It's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. But he talks about just dealing with the inevitable. That's one of the biggest parts about it. Once you accept this is what's happening, then you can move on from it. Until then, you're worrying about what might happen. Deal with what's the worst. Deal with it. How do you make it better from there? And I genuinely believe that's where resilience comes from. So, for example, if we're talking about fires or we're talking about anything, what's the worst that can happen? Right, let's try and make sure that doesn't happen. So you're working back from it more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And that that sort of worst case scenario, what does that do for you in the moment? And coming back to kind of that mindset aspect, when you have that worst case scenario, understood, does that create more confidence? How does it impact your behavior?
It's really interesting you say that, because I actually wrote down the word I'm dealing with. Resilience is all about confidence. It's about confidence in ourselves. Not that we've got the answers. You don't need to have the answers at the time. You just need to know that I've got more than enough about me to be able to come up with the answers when needed. I've got that flexibility, that creativity. And if I don't have it, I know I've got a network of people around that I can ask. That I can ask, not for support, not for sympathy, not for anything else. Come around and say, okay, just help me walk through this. And I mean, Jason, you must do that on a daily basis with clients. It just help me see this from an unemotional point of view. Because it's the emotion that overwhelms us. So once we get rid of that, we start to think about it logically.
Right. Yeah. Just speaking to the emotional part, like I'm a very emotional person, for better or for worse.
You hide it well.
I was reading this article in the Wall Street Journal on Sunday, and it was about this elderly couple that is living in a nursing home in North Carolina. And it was like a true, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Notebook, but it was a true like Notebook story about how this husband was fine. His wife was suffering from Alzheimer's, and he moved into the nursing home to take care of her and to create her resilience and create a support for her in that environment. And I was like bawling my eyes out as I'm reading this article. But so to come back to this emotional aspect, I think, speaking from personal experience, when we are affected by an event, when something unexpected has, happened, and it's really hurtful, and it's really, thick, and it's tough, and it's ugly, I've learned that allowing, Graham, to your point, to, allow that full expression of your emotion to come through as being like such a huge benefit. And even though, that process could be really tough and very difficult, and again, the uncertainty of how long it's going to take depending on that unique circumstance, what happens after you allow the emotion to move through is this open space of having been able to process, the individuals and the event and the particulars of the situation, that you can now see with more clarity. And I feel like that clarity that comes to the surface after, the storm has passed, so to speak, that's where resilience is born. That's where, again, the clarity really comes through, because you're seeing things in a different light. You're not as attached to the situation, or time has healed, some of the wounds. And so, when you're seeing things differently, that's when, new behavior evolves and you make different decisions. And for me, it's always, I've had a lot of challenges with anxiety. And so, really being able to make decisions rooted in my values and not rooted in fear has been a tremendous process that I've really had to hone over time. So, I also, wanted for our listeners, one of the books that I wanted to recommend to people if they're interested, and Jason and Graham, I'm not sure if you've heard of it before, but it's called Transitions. It's by William Bridges. And he's authored a number of books, but this was a really incredible read for me, because the premise of the book is that for eons, humanity has gone through rites of passage, whether, it's girls turning into women, whether it's vision quests and going out to, the desert, whether it's, having, killed your first woolly mammoth or saber-toothed tiger, humanity has gone through these rites of passage. And so what William Bridges talks about is that every transition is comprised of three things. It's comprised of an ending, what he calls the neutral zone, and a new beginning. And what he says is that because our civilization today is so busy and it's so, technologically ridden, and because we're always going left, right, and 6 ways to Sunday to get all the things done that we need to get done, when we're going through a transition, people really hurry themselves to go from the ending to the new beginning. But what he's saying is that it's in that neutral zone where you have this process of self-discovery and insights and learning that actually adds so much value to your present, your here and now, your ability to be authentic, and actually affords a really wonderful platform to, make better decisions for yourself going forward. So I don't know what your thoughts are on what I just shared, but it was a really transformative book for me, because I was like, oh my God, okay, so if I spend more time in this neutral zone, maybe I'll make better decisions for myself, even if it's really uncomfortable. That's interesting to me.
It's interesting. We know all this. You've actually touched on some of it, but we know that we've heard all the sayings. Sleep on it, it'll look different in the morning. Time is a great holder. That's the neutral zone. That is it.
Right.
Yeah. And, sometimes you need to sleep in it for several nights before it looks different. But again, all we're doing there is we're pulling ourselves away from the emotion. We're taking away the things that might just kind of cloud our judgment and giving ourselves the best opportunity to see things clearly. We've all had sleepless nights. We've all had those nights where things are going round our heads. And then, but I hope everybody, and it's not just me that's unusual, but we've got to that point going, what was I concerned about? What was I worried about? We've got that moment of clarity. I'm just going to deal with it that way. We've all written one of the tips I always get people if they get emotional, and we're talking about leadership and they're communicating. I said, see when you're going to send that, see when you need to write that email, write it and put it in draft.
Right.
And have a look at it the next day and see what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it never looks the same.
Right.
Just because we're not being clouded by that emotion over us. So back to your point with your book, William Bridges, absolutely, that neutral point to me is probably when we're asleep, or probably when we're just giving ourselves that time and saying, I don't need to make a decision now, let it just happen. And we get to that point. So this is one of the things that kind of frustrates me, that I didn't know this at a much earlier age, because we know, we've heard that from such a young age. Turn the other cheek, do this, do that, get away from it. And we don't.
Right.
So this isn't new, but you need to bring it up to date and bring it into context for us, just the things that are happening. And certainly the current state of things, we're talking about the change in dynamics on business and the environment. All of these are great tips, all of them. Just be able to stand back and go, okay, what's it really saying to me? What can I really do about this?
Right.
And stop thinking that we've got no control.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got a coaching tool I want to walk you through really quickly. That's directly related to this. And so the idea, and it's related to what you just said, Graham, and Sarah, what you were talking about of the transition.
Yeah.
So the tool, this is just one way to do it. It's not necessarily the right way, but it's a pretty effective tool, is when a client shows up, and you can actually use this for yourself, and anybody listening to this, you can use this yourself. It's something you can do with a coach or somebody, or you can also do it with yourself. And you look at what's the issue, or we call it in coaching like a breakdown, but that's kind of coach jargon. It's like, what's the thing that's not working and that you have feelings about? That's had you stop with your resilience. That's had you stop from, hey, I need to make those phone calls. I want to send that email out for this deal. I want to go ask that person out, whatever it is. And what you look at is, what are you upset about? So what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And what are your body sensations that you're feeling about this thing? And you can journal this, or you can speak it out to a coach or whoever. And then the next thing you do is, what are the facts about this? So if there's a reporter who's standing on the sidelines writing about what's happened, what are the actual facts? Or what would the police put in their report? And it's like actually 10% of what you think about it. It's like 10% of it is actually factual. And the rest of it is just interpretation that's interpreted through your mind. The next thing you do is, what am I actually committed to? So to Graham, like, you know, and we're all entrepreneurs here, like, I'm committed to finding my next client. I'm committed to making X dollars this month. I'm committed to serving my community. And then the last thing, which I think is the most powerful part, is now that you've got your commitment, what's your next action step? What's the thing you're going to take that's actually going to move you towards that commitment? So you can do it quickly. You can take days to do it. So I hope that was useful for both of you and for the audience, around just a really quick framework you can use to like be with it and express the things. Because Sarah, to your point too, like, and I am guilty. I've always been somebody, like, I just pound through it, right? Like brute force. Doesn't matter what I feel, just keep at it. Keep resilience. Resilience is like, you don't actually feel anything, you just do it. And I am certainly not perfect at it. That's still something that some way I operate quite a bit. But there is definitely a value that I've realized over the last few years of like getting present with what your thoughts and feelings are about something and being with it, even though it's uncomfortable. And even in that little space, you can build resilience in that practice too, where it doesn't become so heavy or deep when you're feeling that thing. You're like, oh yeah, I've been here before. And Graham, it's funny you mentioned, like, I had this thing 2 days ago where I was like all worked up about, and I barely remember what it was today, but at the moment it felt like the biggest thing. And it's like, I don't even remember what it was, but at the moment it was a big thing. So good share. That was really cool to hear about that. I'll put the book in the show notes. So as people like view this, I'll put in the show notes for the podcast and here on Facebook Live. So we can actually, if people are interested in that book, which I certainly am, we can link to it.
Okay, amazing. That's great. Perfect. So, I mean, I've been kind of asking some questions and, you know, getting the ball rolling here, but I'm just curious, like Graham or Jason, is there an offshoot of what we've talked about so far that, you know, you want to explore some more or something else that's, you know, just really top of mind as we're talking about resilience?
One of the things I always speak about. Sorry, Jason, do you have something?
No, Graham, go ahead.
I saw a moment with the lips.
All you, my friend.
Sorry. One of the things that it came to me a number of years, probably 7 or 8 years ago, was how powerful curiosity is. And when we're curious, it's almost you were asking about things earlier. When we're curious, it gives us the answers. It lets us ask the next question. We're not allowed to have the status quo. So if we're hearing something, the news saying this is really bad, I just say, why is it bad? How does it affect me? What else can it be doing? What else does it mean? How can I deal with it? When we start to ask ourselves those questions, it makes such a difference. When we're talking about sales, okay, I put that proposal forward. Now we'll wait for an answer. What else can I do? How else might they be thinking? What could I add to it? When we've got that constant curiosity, and we take it just even 1 or 2 questions further on for ourselves to ask that sometimes just pops out the answer. That sometimes maybe shortens that neutral zone, but makes it a little bit more powerful.
Right.
You know, where we're in control of this. When we're curious, we're asking the questions so we can answer them. Right. So we're in control again. We're not giving control over to other people or an external factor, or the stock market, or a recession, or whatever it is. When we're keeping curious, we have control. We might not like the answer, but we've still got control of it.
Right.
So that kind of jumps out.
Yeah, I've got something, and this is something I learned through my coach training, but most of us, most of the time, ask questions looking for and listen for either agreement, opposition, or and not from curiosity. So if you think about it, for most of us, most of the time we're looking for something from somebody else. And actually, I think in coaching and in the ton of training you do, and Sarah, like, I know you do this well too, is like when you actually ask from purely curious, that you either don't know the answer, or you like maybe you know the answer from experience, but you're like, this is a different scenario. That opens up such a world of possibility for people, as opposed to like, and I was so guilty of this in my sales career. Like, you ask the leading question around, like, it's like, and Graham, you do a ton of sales training. Like, this is how you train in sales generally, is to ask those questions that is going to elicit that response that you already know the answer to. And, like, I know we've all worked in sales organizations where if you do it for long enough, you know every question that almost every customer is going to ask at some point. And then you're asking questions for agreement with them, and you're like, oh my God, they love it, and they don't buy. because you actually weren't curious and you missed. They always call it the. I don't know if either of you read Rich Voss. I believe it's Rich about negotiating, and he talks about the black swan. And in any negotiation, there's always a black swan. It's the thing that you don't know about the person across the table from you, and there's always a black swan. And one of the quickest ways to make sure you never find out the black swan is to think you know, and to look for agreement. And if you hear a yes and just a yes, that's usually a bad thing. You want to hear a yes and or a no but, because there's like a thing on the other side of they're actually not going to do business with you, or they're not going to, or if it's even in your personal life, there's something that's missing there. And I just think like that, back to the idea of like listening from curiosity, which is not easy to do. It's a skill that takes a lot of time, but there's a lot of power there. And it's not something that most people do, in my experience.
It took me a little while to actually realize that wasn't what salespeople do. I remember when I had my own company a number of years ago, we fitted out offices. So we did all the interiors, furniture and everything like that. So it was a bit of a concept sell. You were selling a product, but you were also selling a how somebody envisaged it would be. So you couldn't almost guarantee it. And when I had the sales team, and that was the days where everybody would travel around with brochures and leaflets and catalogs and show people things. My sales team were absolutely trained. They never showed any product, any catalog, nothing on the first call ever. Yeah. They walked in with a pen and a really nice notebook, and they needed to come out with the answers to tons of questions. And the first question would be, why are we sitting here? Or, what's your motivation? What are you looking for out of this? And begin to get what the why behind it. Long before Simon said it, what was the why behind? I led the way. But Jamie, what was the driving force for the company to do what they were doing? Was it because they were growing a growing business? Were they losing the lease? Did they want to change the culture? What was it? And build up a picture from there. The products were irrelevant.
Yeah.
The products were absolutely, we can talk about desks and tables. It's just a way to stop something hitting your knees. It's just like, what did they want to achieve with it? And then we could look at what we would do, how we would do the walls, what kind of decoration, etc., etc. We'd come in to get them that feeling. But we had to have all the answers first before showing anything. And that stood us out from our competitors significantly, because most people were in pushing a product and saying this was the best. I had no idea what to show them until we had those answers.
Yeah. Right. And that's true, consultative selling, which is really getting to the heart of what the problem is that they're trying to solve. And, being as quiet as you can for that first discovery meeting. That client should definitely be taking up the majority of the time. So you can just really get all that data to, put together what the pitch will ultimately, look like based on what they've shared. Since we're talking about, sales experiences, I want to bring it back to the resilience aspect, which is, feedback is a really big component of, being in sales and being in marketing. And I mean, there's so many scenarios that feedback is given. Sales doesn't have to be the umbrella, discussion point here, but, for people that have received feedback that, isn't, that great, or, even stepping into a feedback, situation can cause a lot of nervousness and a lot of anxiety. What kind of advice or what, guidance would you give someone that maybe is, let's just say, has gotten like tough feedback about, an aspect of what they're doing? Like what would you say to them?
So can I actually ask you both a question and I'll answer it as well? This is like it's not an annoying coaching question. Maybe it is, but I'm curious, what is your relationship to feedback? Because my experience is everybody has a different relationship to feedback. So maybe actually I'll start and lead by example. I'm generally somebody who likes what I would say is the tougher negative feedback, because I relate to myself as I need to get better at something all the time. So for me, like the nice feedback it's nice to hear for a little bit, but I actually want the tough feedback usually, but it's not always true. Like I say I want it, but I don't always want it, but I say I want it. So my relationship is like interesting. It's like, yeah, I'll hear the nice stuff for a little bit, but what I really want is the meat of what you want to tell me, but I don't really always want to hear it, but sometimes I do, and you'll never know whether I do or not. So it's maybe going to land and maybe not, which is, as you can see, it's just a big trap. So that's kind of that's been my relationship with feedback, and it's something I'm working on for myself too. So for you two, like, I'm curious what your relationship to feedback is before you go any further, because I'm curious about this for the two of you, if you have something different or similar.
Graham, do you want to go?
Looks like I'm going. I had a moment of clarity about 5 years ago, and I was doing this. Talk. There were about 300 people in the room, and it was bouncing. We were having great fun, and I was getting them up and talking, and we were just doing all these just funky things. And then I spotted 4 people sitting in a row, about 5th or 6th row back, with their arms folded, faces all screwed up, staring at me. No emotion, nothing, no matter what I did. And I'm looking at those 4 people and I'm thinking, I've got to change them. And I think for about 4 or 5 minutes during this, I was doing an hour's talk, we're having fun. I was kind of focused on these people. And I had this moment of clarity when I went, hold on a minute, I've got 296 who are with me, and I've got 4 that aren't. I'm going to concentrate on the 296.
Right.
Because at that moment, as I said, I do a lot of training, do a lot of public speaking. And one of the things that I now go in, this isn't about me. It's nothing about me. So I'm happy to take any feedback, because it's always about who I'm working with. They're the most important people. I'm never going to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the smartest guy in this room. I get that. I'm not the smartest guy in the room when I'm on my own. I'm really comfortable with that. And when I learned it, I wish I'd learned a lot of years before. When I've got that, I can take any kind of feedback, any. The challenge is we focus on the 3 or 4%, and we kind of, it's the. I'm going to pick on Sarah, because certainly in the UK, women were a little bit more more guilty of doing this. But we turn around and say, Sarah, that's a lovely blouse, and she'd go, oh no, I got it in the sale. We can't take a compliment.
Yeah.
But if we turn around and said there was something wrong with it, we wouldn't be happy. One of the things I talk about, have you ever gone shopping with your friends, and you come out, you're trying something on, you come out, you think you look great, and they say, no, it looks rubbish on you, it doesn't look good. What do you do with it? 9 times out of 10, we put it back. We don't buy it.
Right.
So we put so much weight on other people's opinions. It's up to us to take that feedback and really evaluate it. Is it real or not? And if it's real, let's change what we do if we want to. If not, just accept that not everybody in the room will like us. Not everybody in the room. I remember running, just a very quick one. I remember running a networking group in the UK, and I said to one of the regional managers, I went, there's someone in that group doesn't like me. And I named the person. He went, I've got bad news. He said, what? He said, there's more than one won't like you, I promise. And that was, I thought, well, kind of logically, that's true. I've got 30 people in the room, not everyone's going to like me.
Yeah. So
we just got to accept that. And that, when we get rid of our ego on it, feedback's a lot easier.
Yeah. I really love that observation about, the attachment and really, letting that go when you're in a feedback scenario. I think, my observations are twofold. I think men and women receive feedback differently. I know in my network of women, we are just very hard on ourselves to begin with. So, and it doesn't mean that men aren't either. But I do believe that there are gender differences when it comes to receiving feedback. For me, I would say that feedback has been a very tough thing over the course of my lifetime because I'm always very hard on myself. I have standards and my standards are very high. So when someone else is giving me, feedback on my performance, I'm always coming from a perspective of, wanting to do more or what can I get better at? And, really, wanting to capture the full expression of what I can improve upon. very well knowing that I'm probably doing a really amazing job to begin with. But there's this article out there that was brought to my attention earlier this year, pre-COVID. I had gone to the Luminary offices in the Flatiron in Manhattan, for those of you who don't know Luminary, but it's a co-working space for women. And there was a presenter who talked about this article that was authored by the Harvard Business Review, and it was called The Feedback Fallacy. And just that the whole archetype around how feedback is given today is just totally broken. And Jason, I'll give you the link to this article so we can add that to the list. But I really, in my heart, believe that the feedback model today is completely broken, and that the missing piece for so many people is the echo chamber of someone's talents and the positive feedback. And we all have our own predispositions to, listening to what someone says and capturing it as negative. But the more that we as a society can incorporate, really appreciating people for their personality traits, their character, how they showed up during the day, what they did for someone else, those are cultural contributions, let alone, the actual direct contribution that someone provides from their work product. I just think that there's a huge opportunity from a feedback perspective to really dig deeper on giving people more positive feedback and letting that really be the area of emphasis. Because when someone comes to the table in a feedback scenario, more oftentimes than not, they already know what their drawbacks are. Yeah. And if they don't, you as the director or as the coach or as their peer, it's art working with the individual, but you want to present to them in sort of a neatly presented package on what they can get better at. And that experience doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be super tough. So that's what I would say about feedback is, I think that there's a really big opportunity for us as a society to improve. And the other observation that I'd like to make is that self-compassion is really important. And I've made several investments really in learning about compassion and the role that it can play in creating space for yourself to, again, really fully experience someone that or something that, includes self-respect and really acknowledges, your heart and where you're coming from. So, I had taken a workshop at Stanford University back when I lived in the Bay Area, and it was all about compassion cultivation training. But there's tons of online classes, mindfulness-based stress reduction workshops, strategies, classes. There's so much out there. So, if you're someone that is really struggling with feedback, compassion meditations are really great tools.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a cheat code here for both of you and for those who are listening or watching. There's a practice that we being like ontological coaching, which is really focused on the being of somebody, not just the doing. So facilitative coaching is great too. It's more like what are you doing about it? Being is more like actually who you're being about it or what you're bringing to it. Acknowledge people for who they are being, not for what they do. So for example, be like, hey, Sarah, like you really brought your heart to this conversation tonight. Yeah. Or Graham, your light and playfulness was really awesome on the conversation. Not, hey, I really like the question you asked. Because my experience in corporate feedback is always about the doing. Good job with the deal. Close this. Hey, you really killed the speech. But it's not generally about, and I think this goes to what you're saying, Sarah. It's like we don't generally acknowledge or give feedback on like who somebody is in the world. It's like the thing that they do for us or with us that isn't always, that's meaningful, but what's more meaningful is like acknowledging you for just who you are as a human being outside of having to do anything for me or like the results that you achieve.
Right. And I think it also, just speaking to the corporate culture a little bit, more just briefly, the when there is so much emphasis on the work product, and of course by nature there has to be, right? We've got stakeholders, we have, quarterly, we're publicly traded, all of these things obviously necessitate, that dynamic. But I think, culturally, what I represent in the world is, taking the whole person, and I think the two of you are the exact same, taking the whole person into account. And when you do that, you better believe that the productivity of your team and of your individual contributors is going to increase, because you know what it does? It makes them feel good on the inside. When you feel good on the inside, you will outperform. You will do the extra effort that a job might require, because you know what? I really love the people that I work with, and I really enjoy, this culture. And so, I don't know if you guys have other observations on that, but I just wanted to ride the coattails of what you just shared, Jason.
I do a lot of leadership training, and as you know, I'm doing it between here, the UK, and Australia at the moment. And the common theme is, if I say to people, think of a great leader, someone who you really admire, you look up to. Tell me the traits of that great leader.
Right.
Who is that? And it's always about empathy, caring, listening. It's about how to handle situations, about being charismatic. It's about all these things. These are self-traits. They're not doing words.
That's right.
They're being words. They are words. So one of the things that I do at the end, we should have talked about this because we're all on the same theme. And one of the things I do to close off many of the leadership groups is we get a list of traits. I say, right, look around the room and put people in the groups and say, let's find a trait about another person in the room. So they need to kind of really think deep about it. But the challenge is always that it's something that's not obvious. So if I'm up speaking, to tell me I'm energetic is not really a surprise.
Right.
Because that's what I bring. But if somebody turned around and said, you were empathetic or you were sympathetic or you were caring or something, that's maybe not something that I would notice about myself. So we want that bullseye, something that somebody doesn't see in themselves. And here's the best bit about it. It's never flattery. Give the evidence. When did you see it?
Right.
And you would, on it, I have had some very senior people at very, very large companies, worldwide brands, and there's a few tears. Because it's when we hear it and someone says, this is who you are and this is why I think it, you can't argue. You're not allowed to say, that's not me. No. You've got to say, all you can say is thank you. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Take it on board. And it's sometimes the first time that anybody's actually just taken that observation about themselves on board. It's probably the one thing it takes time to build up to, but the bonding in a team once that's done is phenomenal. But we can't just do that from the get-go. We need to be in a certain place, mentally, to be able to think about someone else in that way and also receive it. And the hardest part is receiving it.
Yeah. Totally.
That's awesome, Graham.
Well, I think, for any listeners that, are dialed in right now, or for anyone that, that will listen to this after tonight, if you are a director or a manager, that your employees are, going through so much right now. So maybe the question that you should be asking yourselves is, how do we create more resilient teams, as opposed to, tactically, how do we bring people back to the office? I think that this is a higher level question that might beget maybe a different type of solution that can be a bit more holistic in perspective.
That's great, Sarah.
So we've been talking for about 55 minutes. What else? What else is there?
Can I just jump? Just the one thing you mentioned there. If people are thinking about what's happening with their teams, when we talk about resiliency, we said it's about dealing with uncertainty. If we want to make our teams resilient, take away the uncertainty. It's almost that simple. And one of the things that happened, I know we've spoken about this, that Google did about 3 or 4 weeks ago was made that announcement that they were not going back to the office till July
2021.
Right.
Do you know what? That was it. There were so many people saying, this is terrible. I can't believe it's going to be another 12 months. And right away, I'm thinking, this is great. We now know what we're working with. So there's no uncertainty. So now, because of one of the things that's been happening recently is a lot of companies saying, maybe next month, maybe next month it will change. Now we're talking about some of the major institutions saying January at the earliest, some like Google saying July. I think Twitter have said forever. There's a whole mix of things. And that may change. Remember Yahoo doing this years ago and then reversing it. But the point being, we've given some kind of deadline on it. Now, what do we do? The best guess is nothing major is going to happen this year. That's fine. What do we do now? Do we deal with our team? Do we just kind of wait till we all get back together? And, there's a whole host of things that we'll not go into that could be problems there, that we're just kicking the can down the road. Or do we deal with it now? Do we kind of go out and assess what's happening? Make sure that we know, because absolutely, for sure, our teams are not the same as when they left in March.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even if we've got the same personnel, they're not the same people. It's just not possible because we've been working in a different environment. Take the guesswork out of it. Get some more certainty. And if business owners want their teams to be more resilient, give them certainty. Give them something to work with, even if it's only for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
That will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Google thing, my wife works at a company that has a similar policy. July 21 is what they announced.
Mm-hmm.
The real reason they did it is for parents. So you take the school stuff off the table, because as a parent of a young child, it's stressful because you don't actually know.
Yeah.
For two working parents, like, is my kid going to be in school? Are they going to be virtual? If they're virtual, do I need to get help? Do I not need to get help? And you just remove that. I mean, there's still the stress of having a kid at home, perhaps, but you remove the employee having to waste mental energy to think about, oh crap, January comes around, what am I going to do with my kid? And actually frees them up to do better work and more productive work.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And I'm with you. I see these reports of some of these older companies, and I'm just like, what are you thinking? Like, how is this? You're just creating stress. People are going to leave when the job market opens up, and it's just not going to be effective, because you can't be. I would assert that most good people in the job market are not interested in this uncertainty. And I'm not saying that the answer is July 2021, but you're right. Like, what are the things that we as a company can take responsibility for and remove that energy from the space so that we can have Sarah and Graham and Jason focus on the things that actually are important to them and also productive for our business.
Right. Well, maybe, this is a hugely important topic. This is so stressful for so many people that have, had to rearrange their homes, they're moving, they're, having to do homeschooling, teachers having to figure out on the fly how to do remote teaching and hybrid models. It's so overwhelming. Like, the two of you both have children. Like, maybe are there examples that you can pull from that, that could be encouraging for parents right now, how you've been resilient, whether it's been over the course of the last, 5-6 months, or certainly other sort of challenges that have popped up over time.
Well, I'm older than you guys, so my children are all growing up. So I don't have that issue at the moment. But one thing, my daughter is actually a teaching assistant. And they live in Australia. So she's got 2 daughters who are being homeschooled, and she's schooling other children.
Oh my gosh.
From another school.
Yeah.
And they're balancing it. But, it's just, this is what we're going to make that decision. This is what we were talking about. We're coming full circle. It really is. Make the decision. This is how we're going to deal with it and deal with it. Block out as many different factors. And I would say, any employer who can help the employee, it's a great quote, Jason, just saying, but this is why it's been done. Anybody that can take uncertainty away and allow, whether it be with family, with children, with whatever it is. I had a guest on my radio show last week who said the first thing that they did when all this hit was get all their employees back to their family. They had employees all over the world. Everything in the company was about getting their employees back to their families. Wherever they were, whatever it cost, it didn't matter. They had to fly them back, get them home. So when you've got an employer that does that, how far do the employees go for them?
Yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
huge.
Yeah. Resilience in parenting during the time of COVID. That's real. I'm living and walking proof of two working parents with a 4-year-old who went from, and this is the story for everybody who's got school age kids. Like, the kid goes to school 3 days. She was in school 3 days a week, and suddenly it like, wait, 4-year-old on a Zoom meeting 3 hours a day. It's just not, doesn't work. Like, I can barely be on Zoom meetings for 4 hours a day, let alone a little kid. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's so much upheaval, everywhere we look. But I think we've covered some really good ground in terms of, take home stuff that, people can think about, whether they were morsels of wisdom that we, surfaced, books, articles, new ways to think about things. What are you laughing at, Graham?
Wisdom, really?
Yes,
Wisdom.
absolutely.
She's obviously referring to you, not me. So you just take that compliment and be done with it.
I'll take that feedback. Okay.
Exactly.
And Jason, your coaching exercise is pure wisdom. That's fantastic. And I really hope, I definitely plan to make use of that. And I hope our listeners do too. That's a tremendous tool to leverage. So, well, you guys, I loved this conversation so much. Thank you for, letting me be a part of the group and, getting a sense for kind of how you define resilience, your experiences with it, and how you think about it in, the business setting. And I had such a great time. I hope our listeners did too.
Yeah. No, I just want to thank you, Sarah, for being a much better host than I ever could be. And
I agree.
Yeah, and corralling the two of us. Graham, thank you for your insights as always. Awesome shirt, by the way. I have shirt envy over here. I haven't owned that till now. I don't have all my clothes where I'm currently living, so I'm like restricted. And I think you're actually wearing pants too, because you're in a WeWork.
It's after hours.
That's true.
It's just a mystery. This is going to be a mystery for all of us.
Great shirt, and who knows what Graham's wearing. Yeah. That was really fun. So, Sarah, the thing I would say to the people listening on the podcast and watching tonight or watching and recording, we are going to do these again. So if anybody has any topics they want to hear us riff on, or, we can come up with a million things ourselves, but I'm excited to do this with you again. This is something we're planning on doing again for sure. And maybe we even have some special guests.
No.
Yeah, no. Sarah's gonna be like, "Hey, Graham, Jason, did you hear that I'm doing a Facebook Live again, and it's not with the two of you?"
I've decided to do my own show now. Thank you both, but bye-bye.
Yeah. So real quick, I do want to offer for all three of us to just give the audience a real quick, if they want to connect with us. We all have some cool stuff that we're up to. Where can the audience find all three of us, whether it be on the podcast or listening tonight? So Sarah, as our gracious host, why don't you kick us off? Like, where can people connect with you and find you if they want to, chat and maybe hire you to be a host for their show?
I love facilitating. We talked about curiosity, and it's just a natural stripe for me, and I love getting to know people. So I think maybe that just came through tonight. But yeah, thank you. So I am in all the usual places, and I will respond in all of those places wherever you guys want to connect. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. My corporate website, my email is sarah@themodernfig.com. LinkedIn. So I'll give Jason my information too, but wherever you want to connect, I'll be there and I'll respond.
Awesome.
And for me, probably the easiest is LinkedIn. Graham Dobbin. Really easy. I think there's 3 Graham Dobbins in the world. So I'm reasonably easy to find.
Nice. Graham, I want to give you a quick shout out. You also have a really great radio show.
That's right. It's called The Mind Behind Leadership, and it's on talkradio.nyc, and that's on every Thursday evening from 7 o'clock.
Yeah. I'm so impressed that you actually have a radio show. I feel like everybody just does a podcast, myself included, and you have a live radio show. That speaks to either your skill and your bravery.
And resilience.
And resilience. Live on the air. Yeah. So for me, I'm Jason Frazell. You can find me. This is going to be posted on my page. I have the podcast, which you'll be listening to if you hear this later. And then you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. My website is just my name as well. You can find me there. And I've got all sorts of other interesting coaching tools we can talk about. And I know all of us have some really great free resources that we offer out as just part of the value that we provide. So definitely hit us up and connect. I promise I don't know if maybe we came off as a little scary tonight. Maybe.
No, just Sarah did.
Yeah.
I think we got away with it.
Yeah. You can call Sarah to talk about feelings, as we said.
That was feedback.
Feedback. It's good.
But before we jump, I also just wanted to say thank you to Jason for, powering our meeting today and for the podcast that we'll be doing. That's all off of, Jason's platform. So huge thank you to Jason. And then in addition to thanking Jason, just wanted to thank Master Networks. That is how we all know each other, is through this really fabulous networking group called Master Networks. If you are curious about connecting, want to meet other amazing people, Jason, me, and Graham are all just 3 members of a larger group. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Okay.
He's right there, Sarah. He's right there on the screen. That's great. He's the guy with the cool shirt right there.
He's Graham Dobbin is one of 3 in the whole wide world. That's the trademark. One of 3 in the whole wide world. I can't even finish my sentence now. Just look up Master Networks.
All right, we'll put the link in the show notes. Thank you, Bode. It was awesome. I can't wait to do this again with you.
This is so fun.
Right. Never again. Never again.
All right. Good night, everybody watching. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frazell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrazell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're Thanks cool for listening to too. Another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frazell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrazell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.